Hello. Today, episode 7, we have two very special guests here with us. Zway, a family who founded the exclusive tents company and has an incredible story to tell. Very excited to sit here with Paul and Anders and really see the whole story from both sides. Why don't we start introductions?
I'm Paul, Anders' father, and Zane's father, and Brian, who's my adopted boy. We run the exclusive tents. We've been doing it for 20 years. I was born in South Africa. My boys were born in South Africa. They grew up in the national parks. Formative years. We're all into wilderness, and we're into producing the best tents in the world.
I'm Anders Zway. Like you said, I'm his son, proud son. We are proud to say that we're the pioneers in the glamping industry. We've been building ultra luxury, 4-season, the most durable, luxurious tents in the world for 20 years now. We're proud of what we've done in the industry and the dent we put in that universe.
Every podcast, I believe, starting at the beginning is a good place to start. Paul, why don't you tell us how you grew up?
I was actually very privileged. I had a mom who never went into the bush at all. My dad was polio cripple, and I found I was allergic to every single animal until I discovered reptiles, which I wasn't allergic to. As a schoolboy, I collected reptiles and amphibians and all kinds of stuff. And I had a passion for wilderness, and I had a dream of becoming a game ranger one day. I was not interested in school at all. I disliked school. The sooner I could get out, the better. I think my boys are more or less the same way as I was. I started going into the bush as a schoolboy, and because of my dad and my mom never having done it, started my love for photography. So I started just like my boys do. They take photographs for me while they exploring, and I took photographs of my mom and dad so they could experience what I was experiencing. Till last, when I became a game ranger, they used to come and visit me in national parks, and I used to take them in the vehicle. I'd pick my dad up, put him inside the vehicle. In fact, there was a time when they physically picked him up, put him in a helicopter, and they sent him up in a helicopter. Had some great adventures along the way. All of us have a passion for wilderness and nature conservation. They were born and grew up in their formative years in national parks. I remember Zane one day as a young toddler, totally no clothes on, used to love playing in water at the faucets. And I came out of the kitchen door, and there was this huge elephant standing about maybe 15, 20 feet away from him. And I had the dilemma of, do I try and go and grab my son and get him out of the way? Do I run backwards, grab my rifle and deal with it? I grabbed Zane and got out of the way, and the elephant I dealt with afterwards and got him chased out of the yard, but he'd pushed the fence down and everything.
I have so many questions. That is an incredible, unique childhood. And how many animals did you have in your room growing up?
My parents converted a two-car garage, and they locked the inside door into the house because they didn't like everything. But I had over 200 poisonous snakes. They were in aquariums, and then I had black mamba and green mamba, and then I had 5 hedgehogs. I had 6 Galago monkeys, actually they're little bush babies. They were all free. A little black-backed jackal, bat-eared fox. I had an owl that had 1 leg. Arthur and Martha, who were 2 white rats. They ran free in my room. A menagerie that I lived in.
Do you still own snakes today?
No, I don't own snakes today. My wife and I live in the jungle, and the snakes are part of our lives over there. Just earlier we were talking about quite a well-known movie called Animals Are Beautiful People. Quite a few. I had my snakes, I had my hedgehogs, my monitor lizard. They were all in that movie, which was produced by Jamie Ace and filmed by one of my colleagues back when I was a game warden. Cobus Kruger was the actual cameraman, who was Jamie Ace, the producer's daughter.
I always like to ask the question because there's so much history with the distance we just spoke about in time between his interest in animals and then game ranger. Some of my favorite aspects to listening to my dad's stories is him sharing you were in suburbia in some fashion there in Africa with your parents. And there was no real connection to the wilderness. What bridged it for you? Suburbia kid running around the parks with no true influence of the wilderness. What got you connected to nature and animals? And then what made you look even farther beyond the horizon and say, I want to be a game ranger?
I think being told I can't be around animals
Because of your allergies.
Because of allergies. Okay. And the weirdest thing, when they did all these scratch tests, what you're allergic to, I was allergic to everything except tobacco. And that started me on cigarettes as a very young boy. And I just was reading stories about some of the legendary game rangers across Africa, not just South Africa. Just sort of told me this is where I need to be. I think the love for animals started because I wasn't allowed to have any in the beginning. The doctor said no, my mom and dad said no, but eventually they relent. I discovered that tortoises and snakes don't have hair, so they don't give you allergies. And that's where this whole thing sort of unraveled for my parents. They were afraid of all the animals, but they were so tolerant, it was unbelievable. I had snakes in the freezer waiting for me to have time so I can dissect them and rebuild their skeletons and things like that. So I remember one time my mom went into the wardrobe to get the winter clothes when winter came along, and she grabbed some clothes out, and there was a snake coiled up, and I was too afraid to tell them that it escaped, but my mom found it, and I had to catch it, and I got into a lot of trouble.
Anders, did you grow up with that same level of passion for animals and hiding snakes that your parents found?
I think that, some kids kind of get some angst when their parents try and push their lifestyle onto you, but I couldn't have been more happy as he introduced his experience to us and said, hey, listen, there's a whole other side other than TV and video games. There's wilderness out there, and that offers much more adventures and life experience than what modern society can bring us. The roots of our childhood was wilderness and adventure. When he started rolling us into that concept, it wasn't just like, oh, here's the wilderness, I'll see you later. It was very engaging for us. It was very connective. We were camping. We were learning bushcraft, survival skills, a respect of the wilderness. This is a funny side story on the subject is my dad always used to write us letters when we were kids at very pivotal ages. He would give us his thoughts as how we're progressing as men, what to look out for, pitfalls of life, philosophy. But one of the constants through it was he was always be kind to animals, always share the wilderness, always adventure. And that's a constant through our lives. I couldn't have been more happy as my dad rolled us into that part of his life because he was a game ranger. When we came around, we experienced that part, which is a whole side story. As I became more aware of the lessons that he was teaching us, I was very appreciative of it. Not everyone gets those types of lessons from somebody that is a South African game ranger, right? That is the kind of the pinnacle of who could teach you such lessons in life. I was young, but in hindsight, very, very appreciative of that lifestyle and those lessons for sure.
So you stayed a couple of your early years in South Africa, and then you moved the family to the States. Can you share a little bit more about that chapter?
Yeah, that was a difficult period. I won't get into the personal side except to say that I'd been specializing in anti-poaching for about 7 years. I was doing a lot of undercover work at the same time. And then one day I got a phone call from an individual that I'd been following with intelligence and things like that, who threatened to kill my kids. And I believed him. It was just one of those things is that that I believed what he was saying. And I still said to him that I know where your wife lives and I know where your two daughters live. But that wasn't enough for me to say, listen, you've got your career over here and you've got your kids' lives over here. There's no balance over there. It's your kids' lives. So it was quite easy to give up that career and to tell a story as to why you did, because I didn't want everybody to know what that was all about. And that's how it ended. And that our lives were at stake when we left the country. By the time we got to the USA, I'd already been blacklisted with US Fish and Wildlife, that I couldn't get a job even if I wanted to. Even as a backwoods ranger in Arizona, I couldn't get a job. So that led us to Circle K, convenience stores, yellow cab, and every other kind of thing until we started our family business, right?
When people hear game ranger, I think they're going to think park warden or something like that. But the jobs, although both very respectable, they're very, very far apart in their responsibilities. So I think it'd be kind of while sharing what are the responsibilities of a South African game ranger, specifically in that period of time. It was a heavy job.
But we all loved our job. We got paid very little for it. We all had about, I'd say somewhere around about 600 square miles that we had to take care of. And that was from poaching, it was from anything to do with tourists, with animals that were injured, fires, water provision for animals. Every single aspect we were responsible for, with not that big a labor force. We had our field rangers, and we had some laborers, and there's some of us that were stationed in areas where there was a lot of tourist activities. and there were others of us that were in remote stations. For my last 2 years, I was actually in mostly remote stations. My first 2 years were in a mud hut that was built in 1935. It had nothing in the beginning. It was probably the toughest formative years because it was very remote. And I'd never been alone before, and you sort of get really alone. So you get to know yourself, which is not always the easiest thing. But in later years, my boss, Von Kloppers, told me once, he said, sometimes the most difficult times turn out to be your most memorable times. And that's the truth. They were my two happiest years, actually. And then the last 2 years with the boys were down at a tourist section. Some rangers didn't mind it at all. My closest friend didn't mind it either. But for me, I was more of a people ranger than I was a game ranger. There were just so many issues with staff, with tourists and policing them that I didn't really enjoy that part of my career. The only part I enjoyed was creating a road up to a mountain that nobody said you could ever do it. And I called it the highway to heaven. And it was a wild ride up there and beautiful up there. And when the bosses, after I left, when they discovered that I'd done that, they ordered my best friend Tom to shut it down. And so that doesn't exist anymore. But I took my crippled dad road, and I think it was probably the freakiest experience he ever had. He yelled and screamed, but after we were back down again, he said that was the craziest thing he'd ever done. That's even more so than the helicopter.
Being a game ranger is one thing, but you had the extra layer, which was anti-poaching. Not everyone was specialized in anti-poaching. Now it's part of the day-to-day job, but you went much deeper than the average, which added to the workload, the stress, the risks.
Yeah, I went undercover, which I was not legally entitled to do. I used to go on my own dime into Mozambique, and I used to pose as an ivory trader, and I met up with some very interesting characters. And what I did is I opened a little shop outside the national park, which dealt with curios and wood carvings, which was the front for what I actually did. I did stuff that my bosses didn't know about, so my colleagues didn't know about it. And it was dangerous. I mean, for a man with a wife and two kids, you're going into a war zone in Mozambique. Was at the time when I went in was you were in a civil war, and you didn't know whether you're going to come out. But I'd made friends with the president's one of his royal guards. I used to get hold of him and say, I'm coming in, and he'd take leave and he'd walk around with his AK-47 with me when I went around. You sort out your own things. I journeyed under some of who I believe are legendary game rangers. Ted Whitfield, Mike English, a lot of them. Ben Lamprecht, I can go and list them all. But they were the guys of the golden era, what we call the golden era. Before all the regulations came, we had a huge freedom. And myself and my friend Tom and a number of others, we came in at the very tail end, but we're privileged to be part of that era. And then some of the game rangers who are still there, particularly one, Don English, who he took over from me with anti-poaching, and he's done an amazing job. They've tried to get rid of him. They've tried everything, but he's still there, and he's done the most incredible work in anti-poaching. And he's one of the three of the game rangers from my era whose kids are now game rangers, and they've got their own families now.
It's funny, even though I've heard this story many times now, you hear little nuggets of it as he remembers things, and I always come up with new questions. It's a two-part question. What part of being a game ranger made you want to be a game ranger? Was it just being in the wilderness and simply interacting with animals? And then number two, at some point when you decided to be a game ranger so young, you probably didn't have a full scope of the kind of the poaching situation. What brought you into the poaching aspect of all of it?
I just wanted to get away from city. I wanted to get in the wilderness, and I wanted to have a freedom where there was space, lots of space. It was a call to white, and also the responsibility of having to take care of not only the animals, it was the vegetation, the habitat, the ecosystems. That's what they barely paid us for, but they paid us for to observe and report whatever you saw. And the other part was regarding the poaching. I landed up into it. It was on that section on the Mozambique coast where a boundary, where those days we didn't really have much poaching. And they got transferred to the western boundary. And I got thrown into a big poaching mess. So it was forced upon me to take a priority on it. And I took it really seriously. And I, made a big success of anti-poaching. I developed the first poaching database using a program that was developed for veterinarians, but I just adapted it for the poaching database. And I was using a computer. I think I was the first game ranger to use a computer. That was when we were being sanctioned by IBM, and the computer was called ISM, but it was still IBM. And it was still, everything was DOS in those days, and Word Perfect and DBase 2 and 3 and all that kind of stuff. I was using a computer before Walmart had a computer, honestly.
Do you think being a game ranger in hindsight was it harder than you expected?
I don't think it was hard. I had amazing colleagues. We always helped each other, particularly when it came to game capture or culling or fires. You were seldom on your own doing something. You always had your colleagues. In those days, you journeyed literally under somebody. It was a game ranger that had a lot of experience, and they weren't easy on you at all. But you journeyed under them, and they taught you a lot of what you needed to know. And then your own field rangers. These were guys that were born in the bush, and they have no schooling whatsoever, no formal education, but they had a vast amount of knowledge because they grew up in wilderness. They were just children of wilderness. You learned wherever you could, but you felt quite strange as a very young game ranger, as one of the youngest game rangers appointed. To go there, you meet these legendary game rangers and these field rangers that grew up, and you feel kind of stupid, quite honestly. Yeah. Big learning curve too, and it humbles you.
So you always felt, you never had a day where you're like, oh man, this is not what I signed up for.
No, and I'd never had a day like that until the very end. I didn't sign up to have my kids threaten the thing. I didn't sign up for that. Yeah. But I knew it would come at some point in time.
They weren't paying you enough for that.
You're still adventuring with your current business, brings you new locations, new business, new adventures. Let's dive into exclusive tents.
Why don't you give the broad stroke of...
Now you go into, but we do get to meet amazing people.
Yeah.
Just like yourself.
My dad's always been a person that makes his own way. His whole game ranger career speaks that way. And he entrepreneured it from the very beginning, and it was never easy. We started off with one small design and one idea, and it just ran from there to where we are today, where we're not only one of the leaders, but the pioneers in the industry, with tents ranging all over the world, around 47 different countries, every continent.
Cups along the way too.
A lot of learning curves along the way, a lot of amazing customers along the way. And now that we've gotten our foothold in the industry, we're just enjoying the process where the industry is always changing and evolving. We love to bring what we have to offer to some of our clients.
Yeah, it's an adventure. Every client is an adventure. It's a different adventure. We have a good rapport with our clients that we stay in touch, and we send them our latest updates. And if they do an update, they let us know. So it's almost like it is a family business, but a lot of our customers are like family.
Yeah, it's an extension. It always feels like one big dinner party.
Dinner party. I love that. And today I had the pleasure of going out to a site, and it was so amazing to see setting up a customer site, and it was an incredible space. The level of detail and effort that you all put into it, and the ability to connect with your customers and really provide them with your expertise, and just the space outdoors, access to wilderness, and connection to nature.
That's part of our philosophy, where we try to encourage our customers to conserve the environment and to work with the environment and to retain as many natural assets, whether it's a rock, whether it's a stream, boulder, tree, they're all natural assets, and to try and always keep as many of your natural assets when you're trying to develop a property.
Yeah, it's kind of that commitment. We always say, my dad's a little bit different, and we're a little bit different, and therefore it's safe to assume that our company is a little bit different how we operate. We have different rules. We have a totally different way we approach customers, the way we approach marketing, the way we approach designing our tents, right? We come from an extremely robust background. We know what durability is because we've lived it. It's not, we think this is what the mountains is like. We know what the mountains are like. It's not, we think what the savannah is like. We know what the savannah is like. We've all been there. We've lived there. And so we bring that to the product. We expect it to perform for us, and therefore it will perform
and
for
we
our
live
customers.
our product.
Yeah, he's the only CEO of a glamping tent manufacturer in the world that lives full-time in his own product. I don't think a lot of people could say that. It's a pretty unique accolade, I would say.
And a harsh environment, really harsh environment.
Yeah, it is very, very harsh. The humid environment there in Belize is very difficult. But we've learned a lot from the tent being there that long. It's always a growing product. We're very dynamic in the way we adapt our designs to those types of environments.
For those who aren't familiar with exclusive tents, you could give a brief overview of your product, your vision.
Sure. So the brief overview of our project, the three legs is durability, luxury, and 4-season. We offer tents starting from about 100 square feet all the way up to 3,000 plus. We've gone larger, but generally we go 3,000 plus, and we offer a really diverse range of tents in that square footage. And they're very modular, and we have a signature design through all of it that you can identify what a real exclusive tent is out in the wild. We have about 30 plus designs, probably around 80 to 100 in our back pocket. We do custom designs. That's a great, a thing that we bring with our products is that flexibility in design. And then the durability side of it is we bring the highest standard features in the industry, from the frames to the fabrics to the amenities to the thread. We focus on quality. And then obviously we really focus on customer service like we've hit on so heavily. We also focus on wrapping in our heritage into the product. The names of our tents are associated to legendary elephants, which are tied to the national parks. And we service the global market. Like I said, we're 47 different countries. We service large, 100 plus unit deployments. We service mom and pops that want Airbnbs and VRBOs. And the VRBOs and Airbnbs get the same service that the large scale corporate entities get. We really strive in response times. That's the heavy hitting parts of our company and what we bring to the industry.
What's the best way for those interested in learning more and buying your product to get in touch?
To get in touch with us, the best way is just to go through our website, which is www.exclusivetents.com. There's a great resource on that website. We have some really heavy hitting FAQs that don't just service our product, but we try and educate the broader community on what glamping is. We have a really in-depth FAQ covering broad subjects, decking, infrastructure, land development, surveying, and all that type of stuff. Beyond that, they can reach out and contact us through the contact form there for any tents that they're interested in. We also say that they're welcome to contact us, to talk to us about existing glamping sites that they have, whether they have our tents or not. But if they want to just lean on our expertise, they could call us, and our advice is free. If they just want to talk to us about our experience in dealing with environmental issues, landscape issues, how to best deploy these tents on these types of kind of uncommon terrains, ask us about our opinions on some structures or some fabrics, we're here to also educate the broader community as well. So we encourage them to reach out to us on anything that interests them glamping.
I'd love to dive into, I'm part of a family-owned business as well, and I know that the early days of getting it started were some of the biggest challenges faced. I'd love to learn more about the challenges there, because I think a lot of people want to start a new business, and it's easy to get discouraged by difficult times.
I've got an old philosophy: vision, mission, passion. Vision is your dreaming. Mission is how do you take that dream and make it a reality. And passion is what you put into it to make a success. Without the passion for what you have, you're not really going to accomplish anything. I think all of us, it's all about the passion for the product, passion for environment, the understanding of how to take our product and marry it into the environment, that it becomes that perfect marriage of sharing a living space with your natural environment. There are always difficult times. We've had our difficult times where we sat down and said, what's going to happen next? That's no joke, it's true. But it is just persistence, believing in yourself, and not losing that passion that gets you there.
I'm a big persistence person. I think most people know they have a good idea. I don't think identifying what a good idea and a bad idea is difficult. I think it's the persistent part. Most people think when they start a company like ours that there's not going to be failures. And so they set their standards maybe a little bit too high. We've run into it is the faster we fail, the faster we learn, the faster we're successful.
I think what's so amazing, the first podcast I've had, multi-generational, and I think it's such a special, unique scenario, having grown up in a family business myself. I know it comes with a lot of pros, some cons, and I'd just love to hear from your perspective. How's it been for you guys?
I say steel sharpens steel. That's how I feel about it is, it can be challenging, but we don't have to question each other's intent, right? In a more standard corporate environment, you're like, okay, what's this person's intent here as they're calling me out in this meeting, or as they're telling me that my idea is not very good, right? I don't have to ever worry about that part of it. They're being analytical. They're being critical of the product that we share. I don't have to take it personally, because if he's saying this tent design is bad, he's also calling his tent design bad, right? It's this whole benefit of the doubt situation where we could have these really direct communications back and forth. What we know that we're back to that vision, mission, passion statement. We're all in it. We're all 100% committed to this business, as we have been for 20 years. He makes me better. I make him better.
There's not one person that doesn't do what everybody else does. We all pick up the phone. We all speak to customers. We all do shipping. We all do design. There's no one of us that doesn't do what everybody else does.
Yeah.
Except make tea, because we don't really drink tea, do we?
We're coffee people.
What would you say is the biggest thing you've learned from Anders, and Anders, you can say the biggest thing you've learned from your dad?
Anders, I think, and all of the boys, is loyalty, dedication, and the desire to succeed, but not to compromise in the process what you're all about. And that to me is the biggest thing. And supporting each other, because if one doesn't do it, then it all falls apart. It's not like one of the guys going to resign and say, well, I'm done. It just doesn't work that way. We have to support each other. Your thoughts?
Two things come to mind when I think of life lessons from my father. Number one, tenacity. Back to the persistence. It's just about not giving up. I remember when I was a kid and we had to do an art project and I couldn't figure out what to do. And my dad's just like, well, you have to finish this art project. And I was like, well, I just don't want to. And he said one thing, and he said, Zways never give up. We just don't. It's not in our blood. We just don't do it. And so literally my art project, it was a mosaic tile piece. And out of mosaic tiles as a kid, I put Zways never give up. And so a large lesson for me is that tenacity and then hard work. I think that's something that is misunderstood today, and the art of hard work is maybe a little bit lost. And I'm not afraid to work hard late nights. I mean, you just saw me earlier today. I was drilling holes and sinking concrete screws and getting a tent secured for our customer. Weeks before, I was using heavy equipment to set it up myself with my brothers. That hard work of never leaving our roots. You can get big, you can scale out, but if you lose your roots of what made you successful and have the ability to scale out originally, it's all going to implode.
And we don't do corporate at all.
Yeah.
We don't do corporate. We do family, not corporate.
Yeah.
I think you and I were joking earlier that we don't wear suits. We don't.
No.
Yeah.
Barefoot.
We will be like this. Yeah, exactly.
No slacks between you two.
It's so exciting because we get to do what we all care about most, connecting people with nature. What's next for you guys?
It might sound a bit boring. It's not about what's next. Remaining focused. The glamping industry has got so much dilution in it, so many weird structures, not to talk them down, but there's so many weird things that are coming out and people trying to gain traction in the market. And for us, it's not trying to do something bigger or better. It's trying to take what we have and make it better, make it more durable, find new fabrics that might be there that will be better than what we had before. We've just developed a new canvas now, which nobody in the market has got. It's a heavier canvas, a more durable canvas. And I'm talking about globally, there's nobody that has a canvas like this. That's where we're at. We try to remain focused. A lot of people, when something new happens in the market, they get distracted. They think, well, what can I do to get part of that? We don't. We stay focused, but we do love the adventure of new projects, exciting projects, like projects that are going down in Queen Elizabeth Park in Uganda, projects on the coast of Oman, just to name a few. Each is going to be different and more unique from anything that we've done. And that's what we do.
Now we have Zane with us, who's the oldest, right? Yeah. We heard the elephant story earlier. What an amazing experience to just be growing up among the wildlife there. We're talking about what it was like to grow up in that scenario, and then also with exclusive tents and your experience, because you've been since the early days.
Living in South Africa, my early childhood, so it was like living a dream. And, going back over the years has, really cemented that. It's been a big part of our heritage, but living there, as a game ranger son was an absolute dream. I talk about experiences that I think people only dream of, even if they visit the park. So it was pretty amazing experience.
What's one of those memories that stick with you?
I think some of our first camping trips, actually, camping in the wilderness out there. Dad used to take us camping to an old baobab tree that was hollowed out by elephants. Their trunks are really fibrous and they're able to actually bore out the center of them. We'd actually go camping in that thing, which was a pretty neat experience. And the amazing part of tying it into the tents is the whole purpose is to get closer to that environment without totally dropping you into it. But that's what it's all about, is getting as close to those experiences as possible.
Hearing the influence that being in nature still impacts you. Still love exploring and
Absolutely. I'm always, running off in my truck to get back out into the wilderness. And I keep chasing that throughout my life, and I probably will keep doing that too.
It's actually how I designed this business from early on, way early on. I designed it to be a virtual business that for myself, my wife, my boys, didn't have to be in the office, that we could work from anywhere in the world. In the early days, I had a little began satellite. Zane and I used that in the Turks and Caicos Islands, where I could get internet. It cost quite a bit, and we were able to call regular telephone call on that satellite. But the whole purpose of starting the company was that we could all remain in wilderness but still run a business.
We're always, chasing an adventurous lifestyle. And I think that's also with our business, what we try to bring to other people. If people are setting up exclusive tents, they're setting up an adventure for a lot of people to experience.
I love that. What's one of your favorite client stories?
Zane and I traveled out to Texas a couple of years ago to help one of our clients set up one of his tents, and we spent 3 days out there on his property. It was also pretty adventurous too, because it was just the three of us setting up the tent, which is a big job. Usually we'd have maybe 4 or 5 people doing this, but it was just the three of us. Being that short-handed was a learning experience, but he also had this amazing property in the hill country of Texas. It kind of reminds you a little bit of the African savannah. He had warned us that, there's big 800-pound wild boars running around, and it was very cool because, while we were setting up, they had a lot of exotic antelope there. So we were seeing a lot of African antelope that I saw as a child, walking around, on this site that we were working on. And also just meeting his family and, working with him for a couple of days on his project and carrying it all the way through to the end as far as the setup. I have a lot of special experiences like this where a lot of our clients become really good friends and family. I think part of that too is also, we're wearing a lot of different hats while we do this too. So going from managing the social media to actually doing setups to breaking bread with, people who are dreamers and helping them see it through. And they end up taking us on adventures too, experiences. It's like that every time we go out. It's amazing.
That's so incredible and so evident based on the site earlier that we visited, which you were not at, but I could so see how every client experience is so special because you get to see where they're building in nature, their stories, their motivation. Something I always love to do is some life philosophy that you live by. I love having our guests share that.
I think it's a common one, but when it comes to our business and wearing many different hats and learning on the go, sometimes we're doing that, or problem solving. I like to tell myself, if not me, then who? And that always really motivates me to do what I need to do for the day, rise to any occasion that calls for it. And even if it's a learning experience for me, I tell myself, if not me, then who? And then I'm ready to do what I need to do. There's been times where I've had to teach myself stitching and sewing. In the moment, I've got to take a little bit of time and figure that out. And that's the mantra, if not me, then who?
Earlier, we talked a bit with Anders and your dad about family business. I grew up in a family business environment. There are so many unique and special things, some challenges as well. It's just such a unique and special thing to have. So I'm curious what your takeaway from that is and lessons or challenges.
I've just been working with my family and my dad since before I was 14. I've been working. So I almost don't know any different than working with my family. And I love it. I love that what we do has never felt like work. It's always felt like a passion project. And, when you're surrounded, by people you love and you really know, and you can be really honest with, and you all have the same goal in mind. And you'd also, do anything for your cause. It's really made me believe that we can get through anything no matter what as a company and as a family. That just keeps proving itself every single day, every single project we tackle. Our most recent trip to Arkansas was just one of those experiences where we all did something that was a little bit new to us, but came through it with flying colors and with new experiences, and we learned a lot, and it just keeps going that way. I couldn't think of doing it with anybody else.
That's so amazing and well done, because it's really difficult to create this environment, and even just spending time today with your family. It's so evident that they're passionate, doing what you love.
I always felt like what we were doing with exclusive tents or any of our business projects, that it's like a calling to something greater than yourself. And that's how it feels. And I think that, that drives a lot of people. And I find that, here in our business,
We also get up to quite a bit of mischief.
That too. We have a lot of
have
fun.
fun. Yeah,
we have a
you
lot
need
of
to
fun
have
too.
fun too.
Yeah, we get up to a
We
lot
work
of
hard,
mischief.
we play hard.
You
Yeah.
have to have that balance. Wow.
And actually, what's exciting is Brian and I are going down at the end of June to Mexico for the very first glamping show in Mexico,
Wow.
which is very exciting for us as well.
Mexico feels like it's warming up to the whole glamping industry. I just see leads coming in all the time, and I hand a lot of those off to Brian because he speaks Spanish,
Great.
so he's bilingual, and so he deals with a lot of that stuff.
When you think of the term glamping, because I remember when I first started telling my friends, they're like, what is that? I was like, I don't know, glamorous camping.
Glamorous
but
camping.
How do you see it?
It's funny. We've been selling our tents since before that word popped up, and when it did show up, it's like, I mean, it's actually really descriptive when you think of glamorous camping, but it's also it's such a broad term too, because even within the different products, it's like it generally means like comfortable camping, but some of the stuff we're doing is almost not camping at all. It's
tent lodges.
I'm glad the term popped up because it does define our industry, but it's a very broad brush, and sometimes we have to go further into explaining the experience we're trying to offer people. It's a little different than like a frontier tent. That's also kitted out with a bed and a wood stove and stuff. But we're really trying to get closer to something that's fully livable without sacrificing the comforts of a modern home. We are providing that beautiful canvas experience, that beautiful living in nature. You can hear the birds singing outside. You can really be close to the storm if you're one of those people who likes, the pitter patter of, rain on the roof and things like that. That's what it's all about, is getting closer to that stuff.
Your dad's a living example of that, right?
When I go down there and stay with him, I wake up in the morning and I'm listening to the pitter patter of just leaves falling on, top of the tent. You feel very extra cozy when the weather's bad outside too. It's just something about it.
Bringing people back to nature.
Right.
I think I need to live in a tent.
Oh, you won't regret it. I'll tell you another story. We're going to get Brian to come out.
Now we have Brian who just joined us, and first we should introduce Brian.
Yeah, introduce yourself.
I'm Brian.
Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Brian at Exclusive Tents, and I do sales. I do the website stuff. I do some setups and drawings. Do a little bit of everything.
You wear many hats like everyone else on the team.
Yeah, exactly.
He does marketing as well.
Exactly. So do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's been amazing to hear from everyone on the team. But would love to hear some stories from your experience. There's no filter here. So what's the biggest challenge that you've seen?
It was probably in Barbados, I think, was the biggest challenge. Was because we kind of got stuck there. Well, we were told to go.
Okay.
And so Paul and we booked the tickets out to Barbados and we flew in. We were just told to show up, and they didn't. I don't think they were ready for us.
There was no arrangements.
There were no nothing. We were just there, and
there was no food. There was no transport.
No, we're just told to show up there, and it was just on this deck in the middle of an island somewhere, and that was probably the most interesting.
Yeah, with a 20-mile-per-hour wind that never gave up at all. We had so many challenges to try and deal with.
And luckily, we made friends with one guy that took us to the store, and we invented the 3-piece salad.
Yeah, the 3-piece.
What did that consist of?
I think it was lettuce, a tomato, and olive oil.
Yeah.
That was the 3-piece
got
salad.
The basic.
And then also, we really saved the day with there were a couple of Guyanans, and they were the workers over there. And they were so much fun, these guys. They were really good at what they did, but they were so much fun. And after work, a hard day's work, they go to town looking for girls. Next morning, they're back at work.
They showed up very rough.
That is probably one of the more challenging setups we've ever done.
We made the best of it.
Yeah.
We had a good time, and we made some good friends in the town.
How long have you known these guys for?
So we were actually just talking about that a few minutes ago. I think I was probably about 14 or so years old.
Okay.
15 maybe when
14.
I first started coming around. So 20.
He's been in the family
22,
since
23
14.
years or something.
Wow.
They came home with the boys.
Still there, yeah.
They're actually two boys. They came home with the boys, and they spent the rest of the years, and I raised 4 boys.
I hear that Brian is going to handle all the deals in Mexico. The glamping show. Working all these years with Exclusive Tents. What's been the thing that brings you joy or most excitement in your work?
I think it's as far as we've come. It's like it started with this idea, and I just started hanging out with them, and probably causing more of a distraction than anything in the beginning. And then, it turned into something. And now, we do amazing projects for amazing people, from even the big ones to the small ones. And you meet awesome people along the way.
Around the world,
great. Yeah, it's a great journey.
You get to travel.
And so, you get to travel, and they invite you, and everybody's excited. And it's a cool thing, especially when people invest in you to create their idea, and that you're able to take that and then, turn it into something for them or help a little bit of the journey.
Brian's particularly a big people person, so he loves people with colorful personalities. There's never a shortage of colorful people that you meet.
Oh, it's always amazing.
Interesting characters, funny people. There's characters sometimes that are on this particular job thing. There was a guy who grew up living in the Appalachian Mountains.
He was a mountain kid.
Was abandoned by his parents.
Yeah, his family
He had lived in the forest until he was almost a grown man. And,
by himself.
Yeah.
Him and his brother. And so he came to help, and he was hired in, and I think he lived on this farm, I think it was, and he would work for exchange for rent as well. And then he would come work with us in the afternoons, and it was just the craziest guy. He was awesome.
He was so funny. Yeah. He's very different because of his living situation. For a while, locally they call them forest kids. I think we met one or two of them, but he was just such a character. He was so funny. He was so unique, and just a lot of fun to be around while we're setting up.
He was awesome. Guy.
The customer giving the opportunity to these forest kids to come and work for her, and giving them a source of income and things like that.
Town. It's a very small town.
It's also a really unique experience that it just kind of occurred to me. It's the tents take a bit of time to set up. Like the one you saw earlier today, it'd probably take us about 4 days to set something like that up. 3 if we're moving really fast, which is a lot of work, but it's actually cool to, show up there in person, get it done. And then, the person who's invested in it and, got this set up, they get to see it just within a couple of days. It's there standing before them.
Because all they've seen is a picture on the internet.
Time,
and they don't realize how tall it is, how big it is.
And you just get a box, it's all these parts and things, and it's overwhelming when you get it. You put it up, and it's finally there.
That moment it's standing up and they see it for the first time, that's a really cool thing to watch someone.
They get to see the full vision end to end.
It finally came together.
Some people get very creative with how they set out their tents, just like Hot Springs. She's an interior designer for luxury jets, for private jets. So she knows how to work with tight spaces, and it was very fascinating to see how she did what she did. But she focuses on space and utilizing space, which is amazing.
I would say she taught us a thing or two about laying out a tent, inside. She's just, the way she had designed and constructed drywall inside of the tent, curving with the lines of the structure, and the way she would create privacy in there was really interesting, and something that we haven't seen before. Something as simple as the restroom in a tent, that's kind of a challenge, but she had it all sorted out, completely drywalled, completely private, and totally buttoned up that issue for anyone who's squeamish about it. I think that's inspired a ton of people.
A lot of the time we get a lot of designs from clients, like a Malaysian client now, and they send us designs, an architect, but the architect has no clue, has never worked with a tent before. So none of the designs are workable for a tent. And so Brian have been reworking all their designs to make it work for tents now. Sometimes they don't like it because it's not what they envision. You've got to sort of try and educate them to say, listen, this is why we have to change this, is why we have to change that. But we can do this for you, and we can do that for you. We customize it in the hope that we can, satisfy the customer. But that's part of the fun. It's all part of the creativity, and trying to let your customer see something he's never seen before, because he's got a tunnel vision of what he wanted. Now you've got to open that up and say, listen, here are the possibilities of what we can do.
It's pretty common for someone who's interested to go and stay with an existing client, rent out their tent and get some ideas, see how it feels. That's nothing special to Cheryl in Hot Springs there too. Her setup there is pretty notorious for we've had quite a few clients stay there and be inspired and then go set up something of their own, and take a lot of notes out of her book, because she's done such interesting infrastructure and build out with it.
I think I can add that, we've spoken so much about meeting fascinating people. You're a prime example of a fascinating person. You've got dreams. I can see it in your eyes, and I admire the work you do. And even though you've got that one facet of your business, you've got this facet of your business, and then a totally other different facet of your business. You also, you follow your passion wherever it goes to, wherever it leads you, and that I admire. And you've got to, it takes one to recognize another as well. So fun chatting with you. Total fun chatting
this
with
is so much fun and seeing so much inspiration and passion. Thank you all so much for your time today. I'm sure everyone will want to stay in an exclusive tent or build one after this. Anders shared the best way to reach out